Excuse me. I'm going to talk about a little bit about Star Trek Online. If you guys have been following my stream, I have played it. I played it actually numerous times, but I've done 3 streams, uh, and so far, I am enjoying the game. It's actually a very enjoyable game now. It wasn't an enjoyable game before when I first started out, and actually, you were actually playing it as well, and you were telling about the difficulties that you had through the chat of one of my streams. Let me tell you something. The beginning of Star Trek Online is very boring. I'm not sure if it was built to kind of rope in people who've never played MMORPGs, because literally it's an arrow points to a green circle that's off screen, or if it's on screen, it'll show it to you, and you just follow that arrow and hit X button, and then like it'll give you a bit of a story. The story's okay. It's not very involved. It's not like you learn about the characters that you're playing, kind of thing, like in a normal Star Trek episode. But it serves the sort of mundane gameplay. You were talking about how Deus Ex is a game where you don't have to shoot everyone. It doesn't have to be a gun fest, but you can also do stealth. In Star Trek Online, ironically enough, where Star Trek, a good portion is about diplomacy, and a little portion is also about, shooting people, whatever. You have to put excitement. This entire first season that I've been playing was about shooting people.
That's totally against Star Trek, right? Because Star Trek is very much diplomacy and talking about people. Like, really, in Star Trek, the original series and Next Gen, how many times did they really how many times did Kirk actually fight people?
Well, Kirk fought people like, on and off. I would say Next Gen, where this sort of like this takes place about 30 years after like the Next Gen timeline. So I would say it was closer to that. But he didn't. Yeah, Kirk constantly didn't fight people. He wasn't like sent to take out infantries and such. And definitely in this game, basically you're doing that. Like, I go from one portion, okay, fight this ship, which is fun. I like ship battles. We'll get into that later. And then it says, okay, beam over. All right, now take out this army. I'm like, okay, this is odd. Am I part of the Colonial Marines, or am I part of Starfleet? Getting to the ship battles, your ship, the initial ship that you get, is a Miranda class, which is this sort of small escort. You would think that it would turn faster, but turning is the most irritating thing that you can do on your ship. It's like making like a boat full of bricks turn on the water. It's so slow, and like my biggest problem is that when you're in a battle arena and you see open space and you're not paying attention to the map on the right hand side, which is it's just natural. If you hit the wall, the invisible wall, you won't turn. You'll just like sit there with your ship turning, and it'll look like your ship's not moving, and you're like, oh, I have to back up a little and then turn. It's incredibly just tedious to turn your ship. Yeah, you're doing like a commander war. Commander. This is the Starfleet that Commander Worf dreamed of being a part of. He wanted to, slay the blood of his enemies, and hear the lamentation of their women and such. So the one thing that like actually made it a good game was the last episode of the season. They do it in seasons, much like episodics. I think you get like 7 or 8 seasons free or something like that. I'm not really sure. I'm playing the second season right now. So how the episode is that there's a Next Gen episode called Yesterday's Enterprise. It's about the Enterprise C going back in time and like basically changing the timeline, where Picard's Enterprise, the Enterprise D, is in this sort of embroiled war with the Klingons. The same thing happens with this is a continuation of that, where the Enterprise C actually gets into like a time schism and is actually transported into the future, where because that Klingon war happens, the future is altered, and now like the Federation doesn't exist anymore. Humans are more of like the sort of like scum of the earth, or sorry, scum of the galaxy, and they're just kind of like they're scoundrels and traitors and stuff like that. They're basically all like Han Solo. So the human race is enslaved by this empire called the Tholians, which are these crystalline aliens, and you basically are on your ship, and then all of a sudden you're on a freighter. No matter what your ship is a Federation ship. All of a sudden you just change to like a freighter ship, but it's your ship's name the same. And then you're told to go to the station, and like there's a slave master there, a Tholian slave master, like subjugating all the humans and stuff like that. You look around and you see actually people in your crew that normally assist you in away team missions, but they're all these people who are kind of enslaved, and you kind of go up to them like, "Hey, I recognize you," and they say, "Yeah, I recognize you too, but I can't really spot where. Weren't you a guy who cheated in a Tongo game and then got thrown out by the bouncer?" But in any case, it just kind of reminded me, because you basically have to sneak around, you have to make alliances, and you have to like kind of figure out how to realign the timeline so that it's not altered anymore. And that became, okay, all of a sudden it's Star Trek. It's about this weird incident that you have to fix. And it's not about like, getting to a firefight every 2 seconds. Eventually you do actually get to a firefight, but at least it's motivated this time. So it's kind of interesting to play that last mission, and there's a little bit more options, a little bit more gameplay. There's a maze section where you have to like look at a map every 2 seconds. So it's kind of like to me it was like the old Legend of Zelda when you needed to find the boss of the dungeon, and like you're like creating your own map and stuff like that, and you have to find the console that deactivates the security of the Tholians. So you have to, Tholians live in high temperatures, so you have to like turn down the temperature of where the control room is, so they'll be neutralized. And that was really fun. And then you capture the ship, and you had to push it through a time vortex to kind of realign the timeline of where it's supposed to be, where you're on your ship and such. And it ended with a cliffhanger. It basically ended with you being transported to the 25th century, and them telling you, or I'm sorry, not 25th century. You get transported to 35th century. You're actually from the 25th century, and they're saying, okay, cool, you realign the timeline. Thanks for your help. And we're like, you're asking what's this about? It's like, well, we can't really tell you, but just keep on doing what you're doing, because they're basically the Starfleet of the future, where their job is to maintain the timeline. That actually made it a fun game, but I have to say, you're asking a lot for these guys to stick around for like 20 episodes. Now, the big thing to kind of consider is that this game actually came out in 2008, 2009. So it's an older game. So it's going to have some old sensibilities. But it looks like that they may have, even back then I would say that game would have been tedious in its day. But it looks like they may have actually listened to some of the sort of maybe the hang-ups that people didn't like about it. And for that last, that season finale for that episode that was acted as a season finale was probably the Band-Aid that like actually said, okay, well, here's what we'll start doing. We'll make the missions better, and I'm hoping that subsequent seasons will be better. And they've been okay so far. They haven't like, I haven't been like, well, I don't like this part, and like, oh god, I got to do this again. I'm a Star Trek fan, and it's been keeping me around, and I have spent money in it.
Tell them how much money you spent.
I spent like $60. Because I wanted an Excelsior class ship like Sulu, and I wanted all the classic clothing, and I wanted the interior to look like the classic Enterprise with all the classic sound effects.
Do you want to talk? I know when we were playing online, we noticed a lot of bugs and a lot of issues. Do you want to talk about that?
They kind of getting away with some of the missions, like particularly the good missions. One of the bugs, there's the typical bugs of your character clipping. So there's like this one time where my captain's sitting down, but he was like sitting down through the chair. I'll walk around in the bridge of my ship and then all the corridors, and I'll see people not quite sitting on chairs, but in a sitting position. If that takes you out of it, then I wouldn't advise playing this game then, because you're going to see a lot of that. There is this one annoying bug, and I don't know if it's a bug or maybe it's just I just have a bad sense of directions, but it'll say, hey, enemy ships are coming into range, and I will see nothing, and I will like fly the course of the map looking for these enemies, and I can't find them. And eventually I will find them, but they're like really like, because it's like sort of a 3D space where you can go up and down and left and right on your ship. they're really up high, and like it's like okay, why didn't they come after me in the first place? Aren't they supposed to come after me in this sort of weird? But eventually, like, they show your enemy ships, and up high.
They eventually get to you, which I know that was a thing when we were doing the space battles. We're talking about like I actually enjoyed the space battles, but then after a while, yeah, the maneuver, the way the ships move and stuff in space, it gets like you said, it's like piloting a boat full of bricks and water, and the water's molasses.